Savvy Central Radio, drawing out the best from our guests, with host Christina Nichman.
Savvy Central Radio is home to over 100,000 listeners per month globally and runs in syndication on 7 AM/FM platforms, including iHeartRadio and 6 podcasting platforms. To find out about our paid sponsorship opportunities or to become a guest and find out how we can help you get your message out to the world, call 718-713-2289 or email at savvycentralradio@gmail.com. Hello everyone and welcome to Savvy Central Radio. This is your host, Christina Nichman. Each week, Savvy runs weekly broadcasts providing entrepreneurs and successful individuals a platform to express their dreams, hopes, lessons learned, expertise, and wisdom with the world. Our guest today is Sabrina Cohen of WORD-OLOGY. Sabrina began writing everything from short stories to song lyrics as a young girl growing up in the outskirts of New York City. That love of language and creative expression ultimately led to her profession as a copywriter and branding expert at her company, WORD-OLOGY. With each project, she gets to fulfill her passion, producing copy and creative content for TV, print, and the web. She takes great pride helping clients reach their goals by communicating powerfully with the word. Find out more about Sabrina at WORD-OLOGY at WORD-OLOGY.com. Hi, Sabrina. Welcome to Savvy Central Radio. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Well, I'm excited to have you out today talking about your business, WORD-OLOGY. Tell our audience a little bit about how you came to creating WORD-OLOGY and going into business for yourself.
Sure. Well, it definitely wasn't a straight shot. Like most entrepreneurs, it took a lot of trial and error and sort of going different routes before figuring out that this was what I was meant to be doing. So going way back, I started in college. I graduated with a psych degree, and I've always been a great writer. I've always been really creative, but I've also always been really multi-passionate. And, when I graduated, I had decided I didn't want to go into psych, and I really felt like my calling was towards something more creative, but I didn't know what. And so, it came down to really strong interest in interior design and film. And, it was basically like, whichever I get a job in first out of school, that's the thing that I'll pursue. And it was really hard. This was back before the internet. And so there wasn't a lot of opportunity to really research these things without just kind of going into it. So I did. I actually worked in the interior design industry for about 5 years and then ultimately left that to pursue a career in film. And I think the reason for that was because I just loved the idea of, combining the visual and the written to tell a story. So that was like the first kind of step towards going in this direction. And even at that time, I didn't really put that together, but I loved being on set. I loved, writing in between shoots on my own stuff. I really wanted to be a screenwriter, but ultimately after, probably 4 or 5 years, it just got to be too tough of a lifestyle for me. I realized sort of the idea of it and the reality weren't exactly matching up. So the last project I worked on was, and I'd started out on really small films and then worked my way up. But when I really looked at it, I wasn't doing the kind of work that I ultimately wanted to do. And just felt like the stress and working 16-hour days, 6 days a week, it just wasn't where I wanted to be. So there I was, 31 years old. All my friends are kind of settled in their careers and in their lives. And I was like, what now? So it was a really hard time. I went through a lot of stuff emotionally, just kind of feeling lost and feeling like I had all this creative juice and all this potential and talent inside me, but really not knowing how to funnel it. I had started actually after leaving the film industry, working, doing some commercial projects on my own, sort of freelancing and writing and producing, directing those for some clients. And very serendipitously, some writing projects started to fall in my lap. So I think the idea of writing to me always sounded so tedious, and I knew I was good at it, but it wasn't something that appealed to me. But as I started doing these projects and doing them in like a more creative way, and changing the association from writing a college paper to, I get to, tell a client's story, it started to appeal more and more. And after working for 2 startups that ultimately went under, I was like, all right, I might as well give this a shot on my own. And here we are.
Well, I think a lot of people out there listening in can totally relate to your story because, I mean, I was working 16 hours a day too, and it's crazy. And you begin to get to the point like, is this it? Am I just going to work myself to the grave and get to retirement, maybe not even able and healthy enough to enjoy my life?
Yeah.
And is that what I want to do for the next 20 years, 30 years before I retire? I mean, it's not worth it. And so what would you say to anyone out there who maybe is going through what you went through and they're at this cusp, like, I don't know where to go next? What would you tell them or advise them that, you know, to go their next step?
Yeah, it's funny. I met a girl yesterday on the rooftop of my office building, and she started confessing those things to me too, that she was in this job that she really, you know, wasn't happy with. And so we started talking, and one of the biggest things that I learned was patience. And I know that's so hard to hear because it's like, I mean, even for me, I just wanted the answer. I wanted to know. I think the biggest thing that I learned was that pressure that you put on yourself is completely counterproductive, and it's counterproductive to creativity, to clarity, to any of that. So as much as your go-to is like, I have to find out now, I'm already behind, I have to get ahead, I have to figure it out. All of that intellectual, heady stuff is the enemy. And as much as you can, just surrender to knowing that you're going to figure it out and being comfortable with not knowing what that looks like. Yeah.
Yeah. I love what you're mentioning. Before our interview started, you had mentioned how you were so grateful that you were able to have that time, that space to figure out stuff. And for me as well, when I left corporate, and I kind of just told you that I ended up just leaving it because of health issues and other stuff coming up. But at first I was like you, I had no idea what I wanted to do next. I actually took what I did in corporate and started to try to turn it into a business. It wasn't working out. It was my mentor who said, so do you love it? I'm like, well, it's not my passion. She's like, well, if you don't love it, you're probably not going to be super successful at it as a business. But I was just like you. I was like, I want to know what it is now so I can make things happen and grow a business. And it actually, I started meditating and walking and nurturing myself, which I hadn't done for years working in corporate. And it was amazing how taking that time and that space allowed it to open up to me.
Yeah, it's really, I would say that's such a good point. It's the only thing. For me, it sounds like a little, you know, well, it sounds however it's going to sound to different people, but yeah, it's really the spiritual process that got me connected. Even after I started my business, it was still feeling like I was playing this game of catch up, and, you know, being an entrepreneur is hard. And so if you're not connected to why you're doing what you're doing and the passion and the inspiration, which only comes from your soul and doing things you love and being really lit up and getting quiet and, you know, getting out of the day to day, then when those really hard moments come in your business, you're not going to push through it. You know what I mean? So yeah, I definitely, I meditate as much as I can. I run. Even driving can be meditative, but I'll turn off the radio. Anything that you can do on a daily basis to kind of get yourself quiet, you'd be amazed. I mean, it's so good for providing that kind of clarity. You know, being in action in other ways, doing things that you feel like will help you at least answer this is what I don't want to do if you don't know what you do want to do.
My mentor said, so what is your great passion? What do you love to do?
Right.
Because I don't know about you, if you got started, if you knew exactly what you wanted to do when you got started, did you?
No, I mean, my issue was I wanted to do so many things. I wanted to do too many things. And so kind of, and everyone else, even from the outside, would say, oh, just choose one thing, one thing. And it got to a point where I felt like, am I ever going to be able to choose? Am I ever going to be satisfied with one thing? And the irony is in sort of focusing on Wordology and giving it a chance, I'm doing so much more than just writing now. It's become almost like a creative agency where I'm able to take all of the previously seemingly random skills from, you know, the visual skills and management and production skills I learned in film and the visual skills from design and all the things that I've done over the years, I'm now implementing as a writer and as a branding person for my clients. So, you know, I'm able to do all of those things and sort of play in all of these different worlds And had I not put all of that pressure on myself to figure out one thing, maybe I could have discovered that sooner.
Yeah, I like that you mentioned that, because I think we put unnecessary stress on ourselves, because I think since we're a baby, since we're a little kid, all of our gifts and talents are already there. And bit by bit, they're growing in us, and different passions and things we like to play as a kid and do as a kid. And if you think about it, like now what I'm doing here, you saw me back in corporate and said, you're going to be doing this and interviewing people around the world and having live events on video, I would say, you're nuts! No way! But it's because I've been doing this all my life. When I finally started my business, I said to my closest friends, what do you see in me? And I said, well, I love talking to you. You make it so exciting for me to talk to you. And you pull out some great stories, and you listen, and I was like, yeah. So really, tell me, what job do you see me doing? And they couldn't give me a job. They just kept mentioning my gifts. And, I wasn't listening. I was like, no, that has to fit into some box.
That's really smart, actually, to kind of pull the people around you and ask them, because sometimes we don't see the things in ourselves that other people see. And it's amazing to kind of just get some perspective from the outside. And yeah, I mean, again, I'd always had copywriting or advertising in the back of my mind, but my thought was, well, I don't want to go from the film industry to the advertising agency, which is also notorious for long hours and being overworked and all of that stuff. So I just couldn't see it at first, but it's so like wonderfully surprising to me to now wake up and be like, okay, I'm doing a website today, and I'm doing a photo shoot tomorrow. And I mean, there are just so many different things, so many different creative ways of being for me now, and different projects and attracting clients that are really doing things that I'm interested in. So it's almost like my ADHD fix is getting totally met with working with these different clients and being able to kind of play in their worlds and connect with them. So my advice would be try not to be attached to what it looks like or needing to fit it into a box, because 9 times out of 10, it's unexpected how it ends up being. And if you're just really, like you said, connected to what you love and what you're good at and what you're passionate about, something will come.
Yeah. I think our culture in general is very fixated on headiness, and being all up in the head, and it's got to make sense. It's got to be rational. But something like I look back, and when I was a kid, I was studying opera and music. Amazing. And now looking back at all of that, I see how that plays into what I do today. But I couldn't see it when I first got started. And so I think that's a good point, that sometimes just getting out of your head, you can start to make sense out of where you really belong instead of trying to put it in a box.
Yes, absolutely. The answer is definitely not in your head. Yeah. And you want to be practical about things for sure. There are bills to pay and things to do, but there is a way. You will figure it out. And there may be sacrifices. Like I've had to move from my 1-bedroom apartment on the Upper West Side of Manhattan back to Staten Island, where I grew up, where it's, less expensive to live. And that wasn't a sacrifice I ever intended to make. And it allowed me the space and the means to create this amazing business. So I'm really, really so grateful for that.
Yeah. And now that you work with a lot of businesses on their PR and their marketing, what have you seen has been some of the big faux pas that smaller businesses are making when it comes to their branding and their marketing?
Sure. I do, just to be clear, I do a little bit less PR, more just brand marketing and that sort of thing. So I can do press releases and that sort of thing, but I just wanted to be clear about that. But I would say, so this happened this week where a prospect was interested in working with me on rebranding his entire site. So I bring in a developer and oversee, obviously I would do the content and the messaging, and then also oversee the execution of the site with the developer. And then when I sent him the proposal, he said, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I had allotted a certain amount of money for the web developer, and it wound up being like 85% of the budget for the web developer and 15% for me." And it's less coming from an ego place. I really want to be clear. This is an issue that we writers see a lot, where people are undervaluing messaging and they're willing to spend so much money on their website. I think it's a psychological thing where people think, well, anyone could sit down and write. Not true. Not true. They can, but it's not going to be the kind of messaging that really gets people connected to what you do, what makes you different. It's not going to be delivered in a way that leads a reader that keeps them on your page, that, has them interested and enticed to take action. So, just understanding that messaging is just as, if not more important than your website. If you have a really pretty website and you don't have clear message that's on brand for you, people aren't going to understand what you do, or why they should work with you over someone else. And all is going to be lost. So I would say that's really one important thing that people should invest in for sure.
No, I agree with you because I think it's a big epidemic. When you start out your own business, you don't know where to put your money at first. I know I put my money in some print advertising. I hired a mentor. I totally got my money's worth there. But a number of my other purchases were really not necessary. From the website as well, I hired someone to do the website, never actually got the website.
Oh, no. That's not good.
Yeah, I actually hired someone to help me write a book because, hey, I knew that messaging and writing were not my thing. And they didn't follow through. So what would be your advice to business owners who are needing certain things, but say they need someone to help them with their copy or editing and their branding message, but they don't even know how to find a good one? I mean, we can start right here with you and working with you, but how would they know what to look for in a good PR person?
That's a really good question. I mean, I get a lot of business through word of mouth. So obviously the first thing I would say is talk to people, see what they have done, or if they know anyone, to people that you respect in your industry. The other thing I would say is go online, find sites that, pay attention to sites that have copy or marketing where the messaging really appeals to you, and then contact that person and say, hey, who did your branding or marketing? For me, I'm on Yelp. I get some business that way. I'm working on rebranding and getting my social media and all that stuff out there. So that's another way that you can also search. LinkedIn is a great place. You can go on and find people there, kind of get a sense for what their flavor is and all of that. And of course, networking events and that sort of thing. And then the other thing I would say that's really important that a lot of people miss in their messaging is consistency. They'll want to start a blog or whatever they're doing, their messaging, they'll sort of go gung-ho for a minute and then drop off.
Yeah.
And it happens to the best of us. It's happened to me. It's nothing to kind of feel bad about. It's just really important that whatever you are doing, you choose, because we all know there's so many platforms out there. There's so much social media. There's so many different things that you could be doing. A lot of times entrepreneurs don't know, where do I begin? And it gets very overwhelming. So my suggestion would be start with one or two things, whether it's blogging or podcasting, for social media, choose one or two as opposed to trying to do, 20. Because if you do one or two things really consistently and really well, by providing value, you're going to get noticed as opposed to spreading yourself thin and trying to do too many things and then stopping or having watered down messaging.
I like that you really mentioned that because I think I had a lot of people coming to me when Savvy started to get up and going and started to make money. People are like, great, I'm a coach. I want to use podcasting and I want extra cash. Tell me how I can get that cash cow going. And I'm like, well, for one, it took a lot of work, a lot of background work before it even ended up going live.
Yes.
And then just the consistency behind the scenes that you're not seeing. Here's what you need to do to get started. And I would list the things needed. And, you need to do it on a specific time, day. And if you're going to be once a month, it's got to be the exact same time every month with good content. And what is it going to focus on? Who's it going to serve?
Yeah.
And they're like, well, no, I just want to talk once a week or something, or maybe every other week if I have time. And I said, you're not going to build an audience like that.
Right. Well, and here's the thing. I don't want to deter people from jumping out there and diving in because there is something to be said about like the perfection infection where you're just like so caught. It's the opposite problem where you're caught up in getting it perfect before you put anything out there and then you never get out there. So definitely take the leap. But that point that you just made about building up the information beforehand is so huge. So for example, if a client asks me to do a newsletter or a blog with them, I have a service that I do called a content calendar workshop. And it's, basically an editorial marketing calendar. I won't do a blog. I won't take on a blog or a newsletter ongoing project without doing that, because it makes no sense. You have to build up a well of content before and spend enough time on it to really make sure that what you're putting out there is valuable and different and true to your brand, and that's actually going to be something that people are interested in. Otherwise, you're wasting your time and money.
Yeah.
So definitely taking the time to do something like that is key.
Yeah. And what would you say to business owners who are like, okay, I'm interested in maybe doing a written blog or a podcast or a video cast. How do they know which platform is the best one to start for their business? How do they discern that?
Yeah. I mean, it's tough. So, a lot of it is, for me, has been trial and error. And I'm sort of working on my relaunch right now. So I'm building up my blog as well. And of course, my instinct was written blogs. But what's happened is I've realized I might not have the bandwidth to do the type of writing that I would want to do. So maybe I'll just do one written article, like a newsletter a month, and then do much shorter bites via social media or, more visual stuff via a blog on a weekly basis. So definitely looking at your bandwidth, definitely looking at, because I think what happens is a lot of people are like, well, I'll do this and I'll do that. And then the reality of taking the time, especially if you're just starting out and you don't have a team in place and you're the one that's going to be doing all this stuff, really look at how much time does it take? How much time is it going to realistically take for you to map out all of this content and produce the logistics of creating a podcast or creating a blog or whatever platform you're using. The other thing I would say is to look at what people in your industry are doing. So people that you admire who are you're aspiring to have the success that they're having. What are they doing and how is it working for them? Just kind of seeing for your audience what do they want? And then the other thing is also to ask your clients, what are you interested in? Because I think a lot of people get caught up in their point of view, like, oh, I want to talk about my business and and of course you do. And that's the goal, is to share what you do with the world. But you really have to get into the mindset of getting over there with your audience in everything that you put out there. You have to consider the reader and what they're going to want to hear, what's going to make them, notice and open your email as opposed to the other 10,000 emails in their inbox, and what's going to really get your content consumed.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I like that you mentioned bandwidth as well, because I've had some people who wanted to start a podcast, and what they didn't take into effect is they have DSL, not dial-up, because no one uses dial-up anymore, but it wasn't a fast, cable connection or Fios.
Right.
And they were having a really poor quality sounding audio. And I said, you've got to take that into effect. You need a high speed internet, usually through cable is awesome, or Fios. If you want to consider video casting, especially, because that takes a lot of bandwidth.
Yes.
So if you want to do something like that and you want it to be high quality, you don't want to just put something up to put it up, because if it looks poor quality, it's going to be a reflection on your brand and what you're doing. So that all is very important.
Yeah, definitely. And again, a lot of it is just trial and error. So I would encourage people to try things. I mean, I never thought that I would be doing live events. I took a business program a few months ago around speaking in live events, and my first thought was, what am I going to say about writing? I'm a writer. I don't speak. And it wound up being really amazing. And I've held events. I did an event called Content and Cocktails, planning to do a one-day event in the fall. And I see this huge opportunity now for using speaking and using workshops as an opportunity to engage with clients, face to face. And it's been great. But another thing I tried a few months back was a webinar. And, I realized how weird it felt to speak to a screen. And I had literally had people say, oh, I didn't catch your personality in that. I didn't get your energy. So, sometimes it's just trying things and seeing what works and what doesn't. And that's sort of how you figure it out.
Yeah, I like that you mentioned that, because you want to stick to things you're good at and maybe not things I haven't tried before. When I first did podcasting, I'd never done it. I'd actually very quiet, didn't like to speak to people. So the idea of doing this was very nerve-wracking. Well, since then, I've created courses. I've done workshops live and online. Each platform allowed me to grow a little bit more, learn more about myself, and figure out different ways to deliver my message and my content out to my audience. And not everything you're going to be awesome at, but you won't know until you try, and that's a really good point.
Definitely.
Yeah. So what's your big vision going forward with your business this year?
Oh, wow. So many things on the agenda. First is my long-awaited relaunch. I'm going to be redoing my website and launching my blog and getting my social media out there because I haven't been great at that. And just really making time to treat myself as a client because I've always sort of put myself on the back burner and put Wordology on the back burner for my clients. So just learning to kind of roll with the expansion as I'm taking on more projects to be able to also implement all of those things so that I can get out there and help more people. Really, by the end of the year, I want to start building my online content library. So doing some online workshops. Because I think what I realize is there's so many people out there who don't have access, maybe who aren't in a big city like New York, and they don't have these events to go to, but they need help. And I really feel like I can make it easy for people to tackle their messaging and just to feel good about what they have to say and about sharing that. And so there are a lot of things that I think I could make available to people.
Yeah.
By taking them through some stuff online.
And I love that in this day and age, girl, it is so amazing with video casting, podcasting, all these different ways you can connect with people, social media, where I've connected with people in Russia and Bulgaria and Czechoslovakia. It's phenomenal. I love it. But that is just the day and age of technology. The downside, as we discussed earlier, is that people can get locked into never leaving their computer, which can be a very, very dangerous.
Yes.
Yeah, very dangerous.
Absolutely. Yeah. Which is another reason I started working at a co-working space a few times a week because it just can get very isolating as an entrepreneur. So definitely creating a support system of some sort for yourself is key. Having a community, finding like your local small business association chapter or something that has you not feel alone, because even though you know other entrepreneurs are out there, no other entrepreneur's business is just like yours. So having a sense of community or people that can cheer you on is so, so important.
Absolutely. Well, before we head on out, I want you to let everyone know where they can find out more about you and work with you.
Oh, thank you so much. My website is www.word, that's WORD-OLOGY, OLOGY.com. And yeah, you can find all my social media links there. And you can also email me at Sabrina, SABRINA, at wordology.com. And again, that's word-ology.com.
I love the name of your company. It's so cool.
Thank you so much.
Well, Sabrina, I want to thank you again for coming to Savvy Central Radio and sharing your gifts and wisdom.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been great. I really appreciate it.
Savvy Central Radio is home to over 100,000 listeners per month globally and runs in syndication on 7 AM/FM platforms, including iHeartRadio and 6 podcasting platforms. To find out about our paid sponsorship opportunities or to become a guest and find out how we can help you get your message out to the world, call 718-713-2289 or email at savvycentralradio@gmail.com.